The house holds its breath at 11:47 p.m. Sarah Chun sits cross-legged on the hardwood floor, sorting through a shoebox of letters. 6 months of deployment correspondence spread around her like fallen leaves. Her fingers trace the return address she knows by heart. Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, Forward Operating Base. The postmark is 3 weeks old. Outside, the screen door shifts. A soft metallic sound, familiar as her own heartbeat. Hus, the wind, she tells herself. Always the wind. But something moves across the porch light, a shadow that doesn't match the swaying oak tree. Sarah's hand freezes on the letter. She waits, counts to 10. The shadow doesn't return. Just the neighbor's cat, she whispers to the empty room, but her voice carries the weight of 6 months of hoping. What she doesn't know yet is that some sounds aren't meant to be dismissed. Some shadows carry the weight of answered prayers. Sarah Chun has perfected the mathematics of solitude. 1 coffee cup, 1 plate, one side of the bed that stays perfectly made. The kitchen calendar shows November 15th, circled in red ink. Possible return date, written in Michael's careful handwriting, that was 2 weeks ago. Deployment dates are suggestions, not promises. She learned this the hard way after spending 3 days at the airport in October, clutching a welcome home sign that never got used. They met at Fort Bragg. Both Army. Both stubborn. Both believers in keeping promises, even when the Army makes keeping them impossible. Her routine has calcified over 6 months. Coffee at 6:30 news. At 7 work. Atcha home by 6. Dinner for 1. Letters before bed. The porch light stays on until midnight. Every single night. Just in case. She tells her sister during their weekly calls. You never know. Her sister stopped mentioning how expensive it must be to keep that light burning months ago. The house on Maple Street wasn't supposed to be a waiting room. When they bought it 3 years ago, fresh out of basic training, the small rooms felt cozy. The single bathroom was romantic. The narrow kitchen meant they'd cook together. Now, the house echoes. Every footstep sounds amplified. Every closing door, too final. Sarah works at the elementary school, teaching 3rd grade. 28 8-year-olds. Who ask her every Monday if Mr. Chun is home yet. She's run out of creative ways to say soon. The truth is simpler and harder. She doesn't know. The last real communication was a crackling video call 6 weeks ago. Static kept cutting through his words. But she caught still here, and maybe December. Maybe isn't a date you can circle on a calendar. Maybe doesn't help you plan meals or book time off work. Maybe is the cruelest word in the military. Spouse dictionary. But Sarah has learned to live inside, maybe. To find small joys in the spaces between certainty. To keep the coffee ready and the porch light burning. Tonight feels different. Though the air carries something new. A tension that tastes like anticipation. At 9:15 p.m., Sarah's phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Flight 447 delayed, weather in Atlanta. New ETA. 11:30 p.m. She stares at the message, reads it 3 times. Her heart does something complicated between hope and caution. Wrong number. Has to be. Has to be. Michael would call, not text, and he'd never send logistics through a random number, but she screenshot it anyway. Just in case. The clock on the mantel becomes her adversary. Las 9:20, las 9:21, and las 9:22. Time moves like honey in winter. Sarah tries to focus on grading spelling tests. Tommy Chuno relation. Just a cosmic joke wrote Soilger instead of soldier. She almost laughs. Almost. 9:45 p.m. She makes chamomile tea. Drinks half the cup, dumps the rest down the sink. 10 p.m. The local news leads with a story about flight delays at Atlanta's airport. Weather system moving through. She turns the volume up, listening for flight numbers. Nothing much. 10:15 p.m. Sarah finds herself straightening cushions that don't need straightening, checking locks that are already locked. Her mother calls this nervous energy. Sarah calls it survival. 10:30 p.m. She changes clothes, puts on the blue sweater Michael bought her last Christmas, takes it off, puts on her old Army PT shirt, takes that off too, settles on jeans and the green cardigan that makes her feel steady. 10:45 p.m. The porch light flickers for one heart-stopping moment. Sarah thinks it might burn out, but it steadies, casting the same reliable golden circle across the front steps. 11 p.m. She positions herself in the living room where she can see both the front door and the driveway. The letters are still spread across the floor from earlier. She doesn't clean them up. They feel like evidence of faithfulness. 11:15 p.m. A car passes slowly down Maple Street. Sarah's breath catches. Wrong make, wrong color. It doesn't even slow down. 11:25 p.m. 5 minutes past the mystery text's estimated time. Sarah tells herself she's foolish for paying attention to a wrong number, but she keeps watching the clock. The house seems to lean forward with her, waiting. The deployment wasn't supposed to happen. Michael had finished his active duty commitment in March. They'd planned a civilian summer, maybe a road trip to Colorado. Sarah had already started looking at teaching jobs in Denver, places where military wives weren't the majority, where conversations didn't revolve around deployment cycles and PC's moves. But then came the call in April. Stop-loss orders, critical personnel shortages. One more deployment, they said. 6 months? Maybe 8. "I have to go," Michael said that night, sitting at their kitchen table. His voice carried the weight of duty and apology in equal measure. Sarah nodded because that's what military spouses do. You nod. You adapt. You become an expert at rearranging dreams. "It's just Afghanistan," he said, as if there was such a thing as just anywhere dangerous. "I know," she replied, though she didn't know anything except that knowing wouldn't make it easier. The morning he left, Sarah drove him to the base at 4 a.m. The Preton darkness felt thick with unspoken words. They sat in the parking lot for 10 extra minutes, neither wanting to break the spell of together. "Keep the porch light on," he said as he shouldered his duffel bag. "Always do," she replied, "even when I'm home, even when you're home." It became their promise. The light meant she was waiting. The light meant he had somewhere to return to. The light meant their love could survive geography and time zones, and the particular loneliness of military separation. But here's what Sarah remembers most. As Michael walked toward the departure gate, he turned around 3 times, 3 separate looks back. The last one, he raised his hand slightly, not quite a wave, more like a benediction. She waved back all 3 times. That was 6 months ago. Since then, the light has burned through thunderstorms and power outages. And the night in August when Sarah seriously considered turning it off, just to see if she could, she couldn't. The electric bill shows the extra usage, a small line item labeled exterior lighting that runs about $40 higher than before deployment. $40 a month to keep hope visible from the street. Michael's letters mention the light in every single one. Is the porch light still on? I dream about that light. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can see our house glowing. First clue. In tonight's restless energy, Sarah notices the key bowl by the door has shifted slightly. The spare house key that usually sits at 2 o'clock now rests at 4 o'clock. She assumes she bumped it during her earlier nervous cleaning. The keys catch the lamplight as she passes. Such a small detail, easy to dismiss, but Michael always placed keys precisely, a habit from the Army where precision prevented problems. Sarah pauses, stares at the bowl, then keeps walking. Some mysteries are too small to solve. At 11:35 p.m., the power flickers. Not a full outage. Just a momentary brownout that makes the lights dim and the digital clocks blink. Sarah's heart stutters as the porch light wavers. She rushes to the front window. The light steadies, but 2 houses down, the Martinez's place has gone dark. A transformer problem, probably the November storm system that delayed flights in Atlanta, is moving through North Carolina now. Sarah checks her phone. No service. The cell tower must be affected too. This is the thing about military waiting. Everything becomes a sign. Good or bad, every small event carries the weight of cosmic meaning. Power flickers become omens. Lost phone service becomes barriers between her and news of Michael. She finds the flashlight in the kitchen junk drawer. Tests it. Weak batteries, but it works. Outside, wind picks up. The oak tree in the front yard sways harder, its branches scratching against the house. That familiar sound she's been hearing for months grows louder. Sarah makes a decision. She'll drive to the 24-hour diner on Highway 87. It's only 8 minutes away, and they have Wi-Fi. If Michael is really traveling tonight, if that text wasn't a wrong number, he might try to call. But as she reaches for her car keys, doubt stops her. What if she misses him? What if he comes home to a dark house and an empty driveway? Military homecomings don't come with second chances. You're either there for the moment, or you're not. Sarah has heard the stories. Spouses who went grocery shopping and missed surprise returns, families who planned elaborate welcome home parties only to have their soldier arrive 6 hours early to an empty house. She puts the keys down. At 11:45 p.m., her landline rings. Sarah lunges for the phone. Heart hammering, the caller ID shows a number she doesn't recognize, but it's local. Area code 910. Hello. Static. Then a man's voice, distant and unclear. Sarah, can you... static... me. Michael, is that you? More static. The line goes dead. Sarah stares at the phone, calls the number back. It goes straight to an automated message. The number you have dialed is not in service. She checks the caller ID again. The number is definitely there. 910-555-7743. Her hands shake as she writes it down, though she's already memorized it. Evidence. Proof that something is happening, even if she can't understand what. The power flickers again. This time, the porch light goes out for 3 full seconds before coming back. In those 3 seconds of darkness, Sarah realizes how much of her hope has been invested in that single bulb. How much faith she's placed in $40 of monthly electricity. The light returns, steady and golden. But something has shifted. The waiting has become active now, urgent. Sarah returns to her position by the living room window, but she can't sit still. She paces, checks her phone every 30 seconds, listens for sounds that might not be the wind. At 11:52 p.m., she hears footsteps on gravel. The footsteps sound wrong. Michael walks with purpose, military bearing even in civilian clothes, heel-to-toe precision that comes from years of formation marching. These footsteps shuffle, hesitant, like someone unfamiliar with the path from the street to the front door. Sarah moves to the window, careful not to disturb the curtains. The porch light illuminates an empty walkway, but someone was there. The motion sensor light by the garage flickers on, then off, triggered by movement, then abandoning whatever triggered it. This is when Sarah remembers the fight, not their last conversation that was sweet, full of I love yous and promises to call soon. The fight happened 2 months ago, during one of their scheduled video calls. Michael looked exhausted, more than tired, hollowed out in a way that scared her. How much longer? Sarah had asked. I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. She'd pushed harder, demanded specifics. Dates, plans, anything concrete to hold on to. Michael got quiet. That particular military quiet, that means the conversation is over, even if words keep happening. You don't understand, he finally said. Then help me understand. You can't. You're not here. The words hung between them like shrapnel. Sarah felt her face flush with anger and hurt. I'm here every day, she said. I'm here in this house, keeping everything together, waiting for you to come home. If that's not enough, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Michael looked away from the camera. When he looked back, his expression had shifted into something harder. Professional. I have to go. Scheduled patrol. Michael, Doan. The screen went black. They didn't talk for 9 days after that. 9 days of silence that stretched between North Carolina and Afghanistan like a canyon. When he finally called back, they both apologized, talked around the hurt instead of through it, agreed that deployments were hard on everyone, promised to be more patient with each other. But something had cracked, a hairline fracture in their ability to bridge the distance. Second clue. Sarah notices one of their wedding photos on the mantel has been turned slightly, as if someone picked it up and set it down. She assumes she knocked it during her nervous pacing. The photo shows them on their wedding day, both in dress uniform. Sarah's smile is radiant. Michael's is quieter, but steady. They look like people who believe in forever. She straightens the frame without thinking about it. Such a small thing. But Michael never left things crooked. Another army habit. Everything squared away, properly positioned. The footsteps return. Definitely footsteps this time, moving around the side of the house toward the backyard. Sarah's pulse quickens. She grabs the flashlight and heads for the back door. The motion sensor light should trigger when anyone enters the backyard. It doesn't. But through the kitchen window, she sees a figure by the back fence. Too dark to make out details. Tall, moving carefully. She taps on the glass. The figure freezes, turns toward the house. For one impossible moment, Sarah thinks she recognizes the silhouette. The way the shoulders sit, the angle of the head. Then the figure disappears behind the tool shed. Sarah's hand hovers over the back door lock. Part of her wants to run outside, to chase the possibility. Part of her knows better. Military spouses develop excellent instincts about danger. Right now, every instinct says, wait. At 12:07 a.m., Sarah hears her name, clear as daylight. A man's voice calling Sarah from somewhere outside. She freezes, listens, counts her heartbeats. Sarah. There it is again. Soft, but unmistakable. She moves to the front door, hand on the deadbolt. The porch light shows nothing but empty space and the familiar geography of home. Michael, she calls through the door. No response. Sarah's breathing becomes deliberate, controlled. She learned this technique during Michael's first deployment. When panic threatens, you breathe like a soldier. 4 counts in and hold. 4, 4. 4 counts out. The voice comes again, but from the wrong direction. Too far left, near the neighbor's property line. This is when Sarah realizes she's been hearing Jake Morrison. Jake lives next door with his grandmother, 19 years old, home from community college for Thanksgiving break. He's probably on the phone with his girlfriend, walking the property line where cell service is better. The relief makes her knees weak. But as she turns away from the door, she hears something else. The distinct sound of boots on gravel, not sneakers or civilian shoes. Military boots with that particular heel strike pattern that means business. Sarah spins back to the window. The porch light illuminates empty space, but the sound continues. Measured, purposeful, calming closer. She unlocks the front door, turns the handle. Michael. The footsteps stop. Sarah steps onto the porch. November air hits her face, sharp and clean. The motion sensor by the garage triggers again, casting harsh white light across the driveway. Nothing there, but the smell lingers. Something familiar but out of place. Not Keat, cologne not quite so. Something that reminds her of Michael but isn't quite right. "Hello," she calls into the darkness. A car engine starts somewhere down the block. Headlights sweep across Maple Street. For a moment, Sarah thinks the car might turn into her driveway. Instead, it continues past, leaving her alone with the porch light and the persistent feeling that she's missing something important. Inside, the house feels different, charged, like air before a thunderstorm. Sarah locks the door and leans against it. Her hands are shaking now, and not from cold. The rational part of her brain catalogues explanations. Jake Morrison, neighborhood cat, wind in the trees, deployment stress making her hear things that aren't there. But the part of her that has survived 6 months of military waiting knows better. Something is happening. The question isn't whether. The question is what. At 12:15 a.m., her landline rings again. This time, Sarah lets it ring twice before answering. Preparation for disappointment. "Hello, Senora Anchen? This is Sergeant Williams, at Fort Liberty. I'm calling about Staff Sergeant Michael Chun. Sarah's world tilts. Is he okay? Is he hurt?" "Ma'am, I'm calling to inform you that Staff Sergeant Chun's flight has been delayed due to weather. His new estimated arrival time is 2:30 a.m. The words don't make sense. Sarah's brain staggers over them like someone learning a foreign language. Flight. What? Flight. He's deployed. A pause. Paper shuffling. "Ma'am, Staff Sergeant Chun's deployment ended yesterday. He's currently en route to Fort Liberty for out-processing." "Didn't you receive notification?" "No," Sarah whispers. "I didn't receive anything." Her legs give out. She sinks onto the couch, still holding the phone. "Ma'am, are you there?" "I'm here." Eyes and goats. M. "When did you say his deployment ended?" "Yesterday, November 29th. He should have contacted you directly, but sometimes communication gets complicated during transition periods. November 29th was yesterday. Today is November 30th. Technically, since it's after midnight, Sarah's mind races through the implications. Michael has been free for over 24 hours, free to call, to text, to let her know he was coming home. And he didn't. "Where is he now?" she asks. "Currently traveling from Germany to Fort Liberty. Flight was delayed in Atlanta due to weather, but he should arrive at Pope Army Airfield around 2:30 a.m. Transportation to Fort Liberty for processing, then he'll be released on leave." "How long will processing take?" "Typically 2 to 3 hours, ma'am. He should be free to go by 6 a.m. 6 a.m. In less than 6 hours, Michael could be home." "Thank you," Sarah manages. "Thank you for calling. Have a good evening, ma'am." Sarah sets the phone down with mechanical precision. Her hands feel disconnected from her body. 6 months of waiting, and she finds out from a stranger that it's almost over. Why didn't Michael call? The question burns through her chest like acid. She understands operational security, communication blackouts, classified timetables, but this isn't classified anymore. He's stateside. He's traveling on commercial flights. He could have called from Germany, from Atlanta, from anywhere, unless... Sarah's stomach drops as a new possibility emerges. What if he doesn't want to come home? Military marriages don't survive on hope alone. Sarah knows the statistics. Deployment stress, PTSD, the difficulty of reintegrating into civilian life after months of hypervigilance and survival mode. What if Michael has spent 6 months deciding he doesn't want this life anymore? The thought is so painful, Sarah doubles over on the couch. But once it arrives, It won't leave. Their last real conversation wasn't sweet. It was that fight 2 months ago. You don't understand. You're not here. Maybe he meant something deeper than geographical distance. Maybe he meant she couldn't understand the person he'd become, the things he'd seen and done, the ways war changes you. At 12:45 a.m., Sarah makes a decision. She's going to Fort Liberty. If Michael is processing at 6 a.m., she'll be there. Not to ambush him, not to force a reunion, but to see his face when he realizes she knows he's home, to see if he's relieved or disappointed. Sarah changes clothes again. Dark jeans, the navy blue sweater that makes her look serious. She brushes her teeth, combs her hair, applies minimal makeup. She wants to look like herself, but the best version. She grabs her keys, her purse, her phone charger, writes a note, and leaves it on the kitchen counter. Gone to Fort Liberty, back by noon. Light stays on. As she opens the front door, something stops her. The smell is back. Stronger now, definitely familiar. Sarah breathes deeply, trying to place it. Not cologne, not soap. Military laundry detergent. The industrial stuff they use on base. Harsh and clean and utterly distinctive. She knows that smell because her own clothes carried it for 2 years. Because Michael's uniforms still smell like it when they come back from the cleaners. Someone wearing recently laundered military clothing has been very close to her house tonight. Sarah looks at the porch again. The light illuminates everything clearly. Empty, still, but the smell doesn't lie. At 12:52 a.m., she decides not to drive to Fort Liberty. Instead, she waits here, in case someone is trying to come home and doesn't know how. By 1:30 a.m., Sarah has convinced herself she's losing her mind. She's checked every lock twice, looked out every window, called her sister in California, then hung up before it connected because, what would she say? I think my husband might be home, but he might be hiding from me. The rational explanations multiply like cancer cells. Stress-induced hallucinations, sleep deprivation, 6 months of military spouse anxiety, finally breaking her brain. Sarah sits on the living room floor, back against the couch, surrounded by Michael's letters. She reads them in reverse, chronological order, looking for clues she missed, signs of reluctance, hints that he was pulling away. October 15th. The days are getting longer here. Not sure why. Maybe I'm just paying more attention to time. Miss our morning coffee routine. September 30th. Had a dream about the porch light last night. Weird dream. I was walking toward it, but it kept getting farther away. September 12th. Sometimes I forget what your voice sounds like. I play your voicemails, but they don't sound right through the phone. Can't wait to hear you in person. August 28th. Rough week. Can't talk about details. Just know I'm okay and I love you. The letters reveal nothing sinister. They're tender, homesick, full of the particular longing that comes from forced separation. So why didn't he call? Sarah finds herself bargaining with the universe, making promises to God she's not sure she can keep. If Michael comes home safe, if their marriage survives this deployment, if they can find their way back to each other, she'll be more patient, less demanding, better at understanding the things he can't explain. At 2:15 a.m., guilt settles over her like a heavy blanket. Maybe this is her fault. Maybe she pushed too hard during that video call 2 months ago. Maybe her need for concrete answers, for dates and plans and promises, felt like pressure instead of love. Military deployment asks impossible things of marriages. The person who stays home has to remain static, reliable, unchanged, a safe harbor for return. But the person who deploys has to adapt, survive, become whatever the mission demands. They come home different. Sarah has spent 6 months trying to remain exactly who Michael left behind. Same job, same routines, same house with the same furniture and the same positions. What if that's not what he needs anymore? What if he needs her to have grown too, changed too, become someone who can understand the person he's become? The questions spiral into darker territory. What if Michael called Fort Liberty and asked them to notify her instead of calling himself because he didn't know how to have the conversation? What if he's at some 24-hour diner right now, drinking coffee and gathering courage to come home to a life that might not fit anymore? What if the footsteps and shadows and familiar smells were real, but Michael was checking to see if he wanted this before committing to it? At 2:45 a.m., Sarah makes a confession to the empty room. "I don't know how to be a military wife anymore," she says aloud. "I don't know how to love someone who's been through things I can't imagine. I don't know how to be patient with trauma I don't understand." The words hang in the air like prayer or surrender. "But I want to learn," she adds, "if you still want to teach me." Outside, the wind has died down. The night feels expectant. Holding its breath, Sarah closes her eyes and listens to the silence. For the first time in 6 months, she's not afraid of it. At 3:15 a.m., Sarah notices the coffee maker. It's programmed for 6:30 a.m., same as always. But the red power light is off. Sarah never turns off the coffee maker. It stays plugged in, ready to be part of her morning ritual that's kept her sane through deployment. She checks the outlet, tries the switch. Nothing. The coffee maker isn't broken. It's been unplugged. Third clue. Someone has been in this house. Someone who knows her routines well enough to know she'd notice this. Someone who wanted her to notice. Sarah's heart begins a different kind of racing. Not panic. Recognition. Michael unplugs appliances when he's home, an energy conservation habit from childhood poverty that survived military income and marriage to someone who leaves everything plugged in. They used to argue about it playfully. Sarah would plug things in. Michael would unplug them. A domestic dance that drove them both crazy and made them both laugh. But Michael isn't supposed to be here yet. According to Fort Liberty, he won't be processed and released until 6 a.m. Unless that was wrong. Unless someone made an error. Unless Michael arrived early and didn't want to wake her at 3 a.m. So he's been waiting outside, working up the courage to come inside. Sarah moves through the house with new eyes. The keyball shifted from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Michael always sets keys at 4 o'clock. Precisely a habit from equipment. Inspections where close enough wasn't acceptable. The wedding photo turned slightly askew because Michael would have picked it up, looked at it, remembered their wedding day, set it down with hands that shake slightly when he's nervous. The coffee maker unplugged because old habits die hard, even when you're trying to be invisible. Someone has been in this house tonight. Someone who loves her enough to try not to wake her. Someone who knows her habits and her routines and her stubborn refusal to turn off the porch light. Sarah walks to the front door, puts her hand on the deadbolt. "Michael," she calls softly, "if you're out there, it's okay. You can come in." The silence stretches. She counts to 30. Nothing. But absence isn't the same as emptiness. The air carries weight. Presence. The particular quality of quiet that means someone is listening. Sarah unlocks the door, steps onto the porch. The November night wraps around her like a familiar embrace. Cold but not bitter. Clean and sharp and full of possibility. "I know you're here," she says to the darkness. "I can smell your laundry detergent. I can see where you moved things. I know you unplugged the coffee maker because you'll always unplug the coffee maker." A small sound from behind the oak tree. Almost nothing. But Sarah's hearing has been tuned to catch almost nothing for 6 months. "I don't know why you didn't call," she continues. "I don't know why you're hiding, but I want you to know something." She takes a breath, lets her voice carry into the darkness. "I'm not the same person you left. 6 months changed me too. I'm stronger and more patient and better at being alone. But I'm also more fragile in some ways, more aware of how precious this is. The sound comes again. Closer. Now. Definitely footsteps on fallen leaves. I don't need you to be the same person who left. I don't need you to pretend the deployment didn't change you. I just need you to believe that we can figure out who we are now. Together. Movement in her peripheral vision. A figure stepping out from behind the tree tall. Familiar silhouette, moving with that particular military bearing that means coming home. Sarah's breath. Not from surprise. From relief so profound it makes her knees weak. "Hi," Michael says. His voice carries 6 months of distance and uncertainty and hope. "Hi," Sarah replies. They look at each other across the space between the porch and the yard. 6 months of separation condensed into 20 feet of November night. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," Michael says. "I've been waiting for you," Sarah replies. "Every single night." "I know. I could see the light from the street." "How long have you been out there?" Sarah asks. "Since about 11. I caught an earlier flight, got a ride from Fort Liberty, walked here from downtown because I needed time to think. 3 hours. You've been standing in my yard for 3 hours." Michael steps closer. The porch light catches his face, and Sarah sees he's thinner than she remembered. Older around the eyes, but unmistakably him. "I kept trying to work up the courage to knock," he says. "I'd walk to the door, then walk away. I'm sorry." "Why?" Sarah's voice comes out smaller than intended. "Why were you scared to come home?" Michael looks down at his boots. "Military issue, recently polished, but showing wear. Because I don't know how to be a husband anymore," he says. "I know how to be a soldier. I know how to follow orders and complete missions and stay alive. But I don't know how to make coffee in the morning and complain about bills and watch movies on the couch." Sarah feels something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "I don't know how to be a military wife anymore either," she says. "I know how to wait and worry and keep everything together, but I don't know how to stop being afraid you'll leave again." Michael looks up. Their eyes meet across the distance. "I'm not leaving," he says. "I'm done. My contract is finished. No more deployments. Promise. Promise." Sarah takes a step toward the porch stairs. Michael takes a step toward the porch. "I unplugged your coffee maker," he says. Force of habit. "Sorry." "I know. I noticed. You always notice everything." "Not everything. I didn't notice you were home. I was trying to be invisible." "You're terrible at being invisible." Michael almost smiles. "Yeah." Apparently. They're close enough now that Sarah can see the exhaustion in his face, the weight of carrying 6 months of hypervigilance and survival instincts, the particular tiredness that comes from being strong for too long. "Can I come inside?" he asks. "It's your house, too." "I know, but I wanted to ask." Sarah nods, steps aside, makes space for him to come home. Michael climbs the porch steps slowly, each step deliberate. When he reaches the top, he pauses next to her. "I missed you," he says. "I missed you too. I'm different now. I know you might not like who I've become." Sarah looks at him, really looks, takes in the new lines around his eyes, the way he holds his shoulders, the careful distance he maintains, even while standing close. "Then we'll figure out how to like each other again," she says. Michael's face does something complicated, relief and gratitude and love all tangled together. "Okay," he says. Sarah opens the front door. The house waits for them, warm and quiet and full of possibility. "Okay," she says back. Michael crosses the threshold. Sarah follows. The door closes behind them with a soft click. They stand in the entryway, suddenly uncertain. 6 months of longing condensed into this moment, and neither knows how Michael crosses the threshold. Sarah follows. The door closes behind them with a soft click. They stand in the entryway, suddenly uncertain. 6 months of longing condensed into this moment, and neither knows how to begin. Sarah reaches out first. Her hand finds his, fingers interlace with the muscle memory of 1,000 previous embraces. Michael pulls her closer, not rushed, careful. Like someone handling something precious that might break, the hug begins tentatively, testing, then deepens as they remember how to fit together. Sarah feels him shake slightly, not from the particular exhaustion that comes from carrying everything alone for too long. "I'm home," he whispers into her hair. "You're home," she confirms. They hold each other in the lamplight. 6 months of separation dissolving into presence. They make coffee at 4 a.m. Not because either is particularly awake, but because some rituals matter more than sleep. Sarah measures grounds, while Michael fills the water reservoir, a domestic dance they're relearning together. "The house feels smaller," Michael says. "Or you got bigger." Maybe both. They sit at the kitchen table, where Sarah has eaten alone for 6 months. Michael's coffee cup, the blue one with the chip on the handle, emerges from the cabinet like it never left. "Tell me about your days," Michael says. "Not the big stuff, the small stuff. What you had for breakfast. Which students drove you crazy. Whether you still watch those cooking shows." So Sarah tells him about Tommy Chun, who can't spell soldier, about the coffee shop that started selling her favorite muffins on Wednesdays, about the cooking shows she watched but never cooked from because cooking for one felt pointless. Michael listens with the intensity of someone memorizing directions to somewhere important. "Now you," Sarah says. Michael's stories come slower, careful editing that leaves out the dangerous parts, but keeps the human ones. The sergeant who collected stray cats, the mail delivery that came with packages of hot sauce from someone's grandmother in Texas, the way sunrise looked from the base perimeter. Neither mentions the fight from 2 months ago. Some conversations belong to the people they were, not the people they're becoming. At 5:30 a.m., Michael yawns. "You should sleep," Sarah says. "Will you be here when I wake up?" The question carries weight disproportionate to its words. Sarah hears the real question underneath. "Will you still want this? Will you still want me?" "I'll be here," she says. "Always here." They go upstairs together. Michael pauses at the bedroom doorway. "I might have nightmares," he says. "Sometimes I wake up confused about where I am. Okay, it might take time for me to feel normal again." We don't have to feel normal. We just have to feel like us. Michael nods, steps into the room he left 6 months ago. Everything exactly as he left it, except for the indentation on Sarah's side of the bed that speaks of solitary sleep. They lie down fully clothed. Sarah on her side, Michael on his back, staring at the ceiling. "The porch light is still on," he says. "I know. You can turn it off now." Sarah considers this. "Not yet." "I like knowing it's there." Michael turns toward her. In the pre-dawn darkness, she can barely make out his profile. "I love you," he says. Not like a question, like a fact he needed to state clearly. "I love you too." Outside, the first birds begin their morning songs. The sky lightens almost imperceptibly. November surrendering to the promise of December. They don't talk about the future, whether Michael will find civilian work or stay military, whether they'll keep this house or move somewhere new, whether children are still possible or desirable. Those conversations will come, but not today. Today is for remembering how to breathe in the same room, how to exist together without the weight of distance in time zones and the constant, level fear that something terrible might happen. Today is for coming home. Military homecomings, don't always happen the way you imagine them. Sometimes they're awkward and uncertain. Sometimes they require patience and grace, and the willingness to fall in love with someone who's become both familiar and new. But they're worth waiting for. They're worth keeping the light on. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more stories about the quiet courage of military families, the small moments that matter, the ways love adapts and endures. And if you're waiting for someone to come home, military or otherwise, know that your faithfulness matters. Your light in the window is seen. Your love makes the journey home possible. Next, watch our story about a father returning from deployment to meet his daughter for the first time. It's called She Called Him Daddy Before She Knew His Face, and it will remind you why some reunions are worth every day of waiting. Thank you for listening. Keep the light on.